Right there. Thank you, sir. Please introduce yourself and direct your question.
My name is Eze Onyebere. I run the Center for Social Justice. When you talk about harmonizing fiscal and monetary policy and using it to grow the economy, you are reforming. How do you reform and grow the economy when you make budgets and simply refuse to implement them without offering any reasons why you did so? I would also like to be enlightened why you have your NPR at about 26 or thereabout, and people are going to the banks to get money at 35 or thereabout. And you are telling us concretely your inflation is about 14 or 15. This corridor, and if you put money into a bank, all right, you will never get anything beyond 10, 12%. So definitely you are punished for keeping your money in the bank. Now, these figures being banded, 35 if you go to the bank to borrow, 12% if you put your money, your NPR at 26 or 27. Can we make sense of them and reconcile them? Thank you.
This is Remy Ayede from the University of Ibadan. Can you explain to us how you hope to sustain reform if people are not held to account for bad behavior in government?
We have to take a lady next, please. The lady in yellow, she had her hand up. No, sorry. I'm so sorry. The lady in yellow behind. Thank you.
I'm Nasiba Aliyu. So I wanted to know how we're going to use the windfall from the current Iranian war. How are we going to invest that in such a way that it reflects in the real economy? And then how are we going to use the monetary policy to cover any inflation that's going to arise from that?
Okay, so I think we'll take those first, get answers to those. You didn't direct your questions at anyone in particular, but okay, so it's the both of you. Okay, so I think you got the good questions, yeah? All right, so whichever one of you wants to go first, then please go.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Onyepere. Thank you very much. I've been reading you for 10 years, so it's a pleasure to meet you. I think I'll take the one on the MPR versus the savings rate versus lending rate and all of that stuff. So as I mentioned in my intervention, the MPR is a temporary tool which we're using to curb inflation. And if you go through monetary policy, the tools that we have are limited. Sorry, photographer, I'd like to. So is MPR, CRR, the liquidity ratio, and a few other measures that we have, like the FX market and everything. So with regards to the MPR, if you look at what's happened in the past, typically for you to be able to control liquidity and for you to be able to tame inflation, your MPR has to be higher than the rate of your inflation. And that is your real positive real rates, right? Now, positive real rates are important because when your inflation is higher than your MPR, it means that every money you put in the bank, the value is being eroded away on a daily basis. So let's imagine that you put 100,000 naira in any bank today. And let's say, hypothetically, inflation is at 15%, MPR is at 5%, hypothetically. By the time you come back at the end of the year, the value of your 100,000 would be significantly eroded, right? Now that's one channel. The second one is that when investors are making an investment decision, they look at your inflation and MPR differential, your positive real rates. For all the economies that have negative real rates, investment does not flow. Why? Because when they bring in their money, for every day their money is here, it is depleting in value. So you have to achieve positive real rates. Now, for almost 2 decades in Nigeria, a long time, our real rates were negative. Now, this accounts for one of the reasons why you can see that the curve for investment was going down for over a 10-year period. So we had to achieve positive real rates, right? And that's why you saw the consistent move in the MPR to get to above inflation. Now we've now gotten to above inflation, and now you're talking about why the wide differential. So the second thing we then have to look at is, okay, if one of our objectives is to attract investment, who are we competing with in this space? So in sub-Saharan Africa, we're competing with the likes of Egypt, Kenya, South Africa, Ghana. So if you look at the differential, for example, in these economies, because when I'm a trader sitting on a desk in London or in New York, what I'm looking at are these metrics. Where am I going to take $100 million today, on Monday? Where do I take $1 billion tomorrow? And what makes the difference is where these flows are. Now, these flows are important because every day in Nigeria today, right, our market used to turn over $200 million per day. Today, we're turning over almost $3 to $4 billion sometimes. Last week, three days ago, we did about $1.5 billion, right? Now, this brings the liquidity to the market. It's about how the FX goes in and out without central bank needing to intervene or deplete our reserves. So these things all circle back. Do we envisage that this is going to go on for much longer? No. As the disinflation trajectory continues, the MPR cuts will also follow. What the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee, tries to do is to follow data. It's very unemotional. It's not about whose friend has collected a loan. It's very unemotional. What does the data say? What do other economies globally, what are they doing? Now, if you look at the market expectation, for example, from the last MPR, there was an expectation that there will be a significant cut. But part of the data that was reviewed by the MPs, which many times is not public, are some of the uncertainties in the global economy. Now, did we know there was going to be an Iran war? We didn't. But now that it has happened, it has justified the cautious easing. Why? Because if you look at Turkey, last week, Turkey spent $12 billion to defend its currency because of the outflows from the war. Turkey spent $12 billion. Okay? Now, we have, in the opposite, yesterday and day before, I've seen actually more inflows coming in. Because as investors are flying to safety, they're going to jurisdictions where the returns are still high. And one of those jurisdictions is Nigeria. And when these funds flow in, they stop the currency from moving negatively against us. And so while you saw a short depreciation, I think at the end of last week, we've now seen from yesterday, day before, an appreciation. And it's because of these flows. And it's tied to this. So while we continue, the world is a very, very dynamic place today, very challenging. We have 2 or 3 shocks that we're expecting this year. We have the elections, and you know how that goes, with a lot of liquidity. We have to be very careful regarding how inflation goes. And then we have the US, which has become a major pole of uncertainty. And then now we have this war. And people think that I'll just take your question so that, Sanyani can take over. We've sat down with our colleagues to really look at all the potential impacts, positive and negative, emerging around this war. Part of the impacts, of course, are a fiscal windfall, right? We did our budget at X dollars a barrel. Oil is now much higher, right? So that differential, we're expecting it, right? We're hoping for it. And hopefully when it comes, then the fiscal has a question of what do you do with it? I'll wait for Charlie to answer. But you see, it also has a negative. The negative is you have shipping routes that are closed that also carry significant amounts of trade, both from Nigeria in terms of export and to Nigeria in terms of imports, for example, fertilizer, right? So there is a risk of upswings to inflation because of these supply chain disruptions. So we have to look at net, where do we fall as an economy, and be able to sit down together with the fiscal side in terms of that collaboration that Mr. Yorinki already talked about, and see what is the best way to position this economy. How do we ensure that we are trapping all the gains and as much as possible avoiding the negatives? And I can tell you these are the things that are keeping us awake at night every single day. Thank you very much.
So as Mohammed just said, we're not operating in a silo. There's so many other things happening. So if we take, for example, the 2025 budget, we know that the budget assumptions for oil price was 75 and production was 2.06 million barrels a day. In reality, the production was on average roughly about 1.6 million. And oil price, we've spoken about the US effect, Trump. We all remember what happened last year when, Liberation Day and tariffs and what that did to oil price. So I say all that to say that there was, in terms of the expectations of cash inflows, oil revenues did suffer. But thankfully, non-oil revenues did quite well. But you've got to remember, federal government, basically there's federation revenue and federal government revenue. And federal government gets about 52% of oil revenues, but a lot less of non-oil revenue. So when the oil revenues, there's a shortfall, we suffer disproportionately compared to states. And so if you've got a shortfall in inflow, you have to look at how you spend that money, because there's a limit to how much you can borrow. One, because there's a limit in the budget and therefore the whole appropriation law, but two, also from a debt sustainability standpoint. You can't just say, oh, I have a shortfall of, take a figure, 5 trillion, so let me run and borrow 5 trillion to be able to spend. That would be fiscally irresponsible. So we'll have to ensure that there is prioritization in terms of how we spend. For example, wages and salaries are a very high priority. And when we talk about budget implementation, especially capital, because I know that's very topical now, two things for us to remember is that in 2025, throughout the year, we were also spending on 2024 CapEx from that one pot. And two, there are two aspects of capital investment. There's the ones through the MDAs, but also the ones through project-tied loans from multilateral funding partners. And they continue, according to the 2025. So really, that's the answer to the budget implementation question.
My name is Abdul Halim Ishaq Ringim. I work with the Kaduna State Government, and I think I would have to restate the question regarding the Iranian war. Because
Do you have a question?
yes,
Okay. We'll press for time. Sunday Okoli has to leave. So
I don't
you got
think it
it.
has been answered.
Who's your question directed to?
The government representatives. So I don't think it has been answered. There's the windfall, but then the Iranian war and the entire issue has the potential of also eroding the disinflationary trend that we're currently going through, and then the inflation that we're talking about. So how is the monetary and fiscal side of government hoping to curb the menace of the ripple effects of the Iranian war?
Okay, so the ripple effects of the war. Two more. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Damilola Balajobi. I'm a professor of political science and also the political settlement researcher for African City Research Consortium. I want to appreciate Professor Dr. Abdul for your intervention about politics, and I want to ask Mr. Koli. So how do we do political visible interventions that everybody can win? Because most of the things we're talking about, in reality, the people at the informal settlement, they're not actually benefiting from some of these reforms. So what do you think we can do, especially because we know that government changes regularly? That's questions for you, Ma. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think you need to clarify your question, but one more time.
I mean, I'm talking about the politics of reform.
The politics of reform.
Yes.
Okay.
How do we ensure that we do reform that people, especially at the local level, benefit?
Okay, so everybody feels all right.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't want the people in the back to riot, so we gotta have a microphone, please. There was the gentleman whose arm is longer than everybody else's. Yeah, him right there. Yes, let's get him in the back. Please introduce yourself, sir, and your question. And please direct your question.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Kuram Pulatife. I intern in Microsoft Nigeria. My question will be for the hope of the common and for the youth. I'm a young person. What is really the hope, and how does this policy reform? How does it actualize to the young people? A young person trying to start life. There's a lot of the price of cutting a loan will make you stay back in your parents' house. So, like, what is the hope for we, and how do these reforms come to us in better experience? Thank you so much.
It looks like the two of you are gonna get all the questions today. Okay, let's have those. Did you catch his question on the? Okay, so those are the next set.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, before I answer him, I just saw one of my economics teachers in the. So can we give a round of applause for Professor Muntaka, please? So any downside to the reform that CBN is doing is his fault. Professor Salamat is also here from ABU, so thank you very much for all the intellectual background. Yes, my brother, I think, he asked about the war and how the effects of that are being handled from monetary and fiscal side, I believe. And I think I started to answer that in the first part of the questions. I think, we sat, when was it, Tuesday, right? With the Minister of Finance, Coordinating Minister of the Economy as part of the economic management team. To really try to dissect this. And I think the minister even gave an interview yesterday regarding this parts of this issue. It's a developing situation, as you know. We are monitoring it very, very closely. We've had scenarios done regarding how long, if it's a 3 to 4 week war, what are the impacts on us? If it goes on beyond that, what are the impacts? All the way to an extreme scenario, right, where it's long drawn and all of that. And we've sort of had policy options for every single one of those things. So we are prepared as we can be to ensure that we get the gains, because we're not also assuming that these gains will come automatic, right? Or we're not assuming also that we can avoid the fallouts automatically. It is a developing situation. I don't think any economy today can tell you for certain what exactly is going to happen. So that's why the scenarios are there to build out from least case to worst case. Now, how prepared are we? I think we're much better prepared today than we have been in the last 10 years, right? We're much better prepared. Why? Firstly, I think that the stability that we have achieved, there's some things that are, as I said in the beginning, it's fragile stability, and this is one of the reasons why it's fragile. However, we have a system now where we think, within Central Bank, we have early warning signals. There's a team that's focusing on that every single day. If this had happened 3 years ago, when we had $800 million of reserves, it would have been economic collapse, for sure, right? Today, it has happened where we have $50 billion plus of reserves. We have $34 billion of reserves that is fully ours, organically built. So we are ready to be able to step in and smooth the market as much as possible. We have a system today with the fiscal where, the Minister of Agriculture was part of the economic management team. We're looking at supply lines for various products, household consumptions, so we've looked at it very, very deeply. Of course, we can't go into the details, but what I can assure you is that we are ready, we are preparing to be better as much as possible, and we're hoping, because it's not just the economic impact of the war, but we're also very, very concerned about the lives that are being lost today around the world, the properties that are being destroyed, economies that are being destroyed around the world. Many of people that we work with, if we call them today, they are the people that are facing. So this is not some theoretical war. These are people that we know and we work with, people that you meet when you go to international forum that are going through this. So it's not only for us to also look at and say, how does Nigeria benefit, but also to be empathetic enough to say, this should stop as soon as possible, but also while we're asking for that, we also have to be as prepared as we can be.
Thank you for that. Sorry, did you want to take the youth question or did you want to?
They're both wrapped.
Okay.
What everybody's saying, including Doctor, is we've heard everything you've said, big picture, the macro. But how does that affect the individual Nigerian? We have seen our lives become, and the data is there. It's not hard. You go to the market. I go to the shops. And then you see the price, you want to shout, and then you remember your job title, and you keep quiet, and you keep it moving. So it is real.
I do go to the market, but I think it's very easy sometimes to assume, the government, they don't really care. Nobody in Nigeria, and including the president, every single Nigerian, at least from my metric, is at least one cousin away from poverty. So if you don't see it in your own house, you see it very next door. So I can assure you none of us is immune to what is happening, right? We could be in situations today where we have the honor to be able to serve the country, but we're also very, very mindful that this thing can change tomorrow. And it will be somebody from within the audience. I won't be sitting here and going through the same thing. So I just want to assure you that we are not immune. We fully feel this, and we are as frustrated. Of course, sometimes we can't come out and say the things that we wanted, but we are as frustrated as about the speed, about being able to implement this social. If it's up to me, I'll employ every single Nigerian. Make sure you have incomes that are respectable. But it's just not that, and it's a process that we just unfortunately, have to follow.
So let's take it down the line. People need jobs. They need not just access to food and electricity, but it needs to be at an affordable level, because just having power that I can't afford, and I'm having to turn off all my lights, even turn off my fridge, it doesn't help. So we completely get that. But what we're trying to say is that for us to have, let's take the electricity sector. You need it produced, you need enough of it produced, you need it to go through the transmission system, you then need to get it to the discos before it goes to our homes and businesses. And there are challenges across the entire value chain. So you're having to do work across, at the Genco level. And so what I was talking about was, I'm keeping it real. It's not that we now see a lot more electricity, but whereas the Genco levels, they were owed a significant amount of money. Federal government issued a 1 trillion naira bond to begin to bring that down. So the economics make sense for them. On the transmission side, even this week, we're working with one of our development partners to release funding that has been secured to address some of the transmission issues. Yesterday, we were talking about work on the disco. So you're having to attack it, all at the same time. And unfortunately, these things are just a bit slower. In fact, one of the questions I asked, and they shall remain nameless, but a development partner yesterday, is it always this slow? Or is it just Nigeria? And we were told that actually, that over the last couple of years, from when we develop a program, you design the program, then you get the board approval, and that, the whole thing before the cash gets into the system, before the lines are built, et cetera, et cetera. And they're saying, globally, it is generally a slow process. And Nigeria, in the last couple of years, we've even made progress. Food security from the COVID time. I don't know how, I can't remember what I was reading. That made me realize food security, I was not in government then. Food security should be a concern for everyone. And then the Russia-Ukraine war, et cetera, it became clear that actually, it is indeed, we're talking about the current war. It affects fertilizers. It affects urea. So these were some of the conversations the agric minister was talking about on Tuesday. And it's sometimes it's as you're sitting in the room, you even get a better sense of how these things, something I hadn't thought about was fuel, irrigation pumps based on petrol. So that when the petrol price goes up, it even affects the farmer to that level. So essentially, I'm saying that, you've spoken about the human capital. It's not at all lost without, health and education. You can't be talking about economic growth if you're not investing in health, if you're not investing in education, because you will not get sustainable growth. But it's a hydra-headed monster that you're trying to attack all the different things at the same time, and you keep pushing. But the good thing is there's greater prioritization, knowing the things that matter the most to people now, and ensuring that we're spending as much of not just time, but the resources pushing on those areas. And that will create the jobs for the youth, and not just jobs, but the opportunities. Because when there's the electricity, even if a young person cannot get a job, but there are different businesses they'll be able to start with a fiber network. Think of what that does. We know where the world, it's not just has gone, but it's going in terms of digitization, etc. With that fiber network, we'll create, tremendous opportunities. And I know it's frustrating. I know it feels slower than everybody wants, but I implore you, honestly, just take some comfort from the fact that people, they know, the North Star. They recognize the North Star, and they are pushing and pushing forward. And we cannot relent. We've all come too far. We had a conversation on Tuesday when somebody mentioned something that seemed to be going back. I was like, we cannot. It's like Nigeria has come too far for us to turn back. We just have to keep pushing.
Thank you so much for that. And I just have to say this, for those of you who are seeing Sayende Okoli as a government person, Google Sayende Okoli Arise News. She's been a regular on my show for the past 4 or 5 years, just to get her views on what's been happening in the private sector before, of course, and she's very consistent, I can promise you that. We've got, okay, the young lady there she's standing up. Okay, yes, she was the one I was about to ask a question, and we took the mic away from her. So your name, please. And please be very, very brief and specific in your question. They have to leave. Our panelists have to leave.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Olukemi Akimushiri. I'm a comrade on one side. I'm an economist at fellowship level, chartered accountant at fellowship level, management consultant at fellowship level. So I don't know where I'm...
Leave a round of applause to question, please.
So now, this is my former country director, Dr. Hussein Abdu. As I said, I'm a comrade on one side. My question is very practical. All the analyses, I'm even part of some of the engagements at some level, but we have a big problem, insecurity, that we are not tying to economics. And I expected us to really talk about it here. I have a client who is into agric, and
I'm so sorry. Okay, so insecurity. Okay, we have
insecurity,
to get... Yes, okay.
Roads. Now, if you want to go and farm and they kidnap you, you are not sure you will come back alive. How do we do it? Insecurity.
Perfect. Insecurity. Okay. This gentleman in the red T-shirt, he's been waving over and over. At the back. The gentleman at the back. No, okay, sorry. What's going... Okay. Okay, this lady here. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Winifred Wisdom-Aigbose. So my question is, first of all, they talked about...
your question, you got to get to your question. Yes, what is your question?
I have two questions. They talk about...
We're only going to take one. We're taking one question. You have to make it as specific as possible.
Okay. So my question is, I founded a network of female business owners. And then what I do is I made sure, because I discovered that...
You have to get to your question.
Yeah, so that it's to be clear.
Yes.
Sorry. So I discovered that there's a huge problem with electricity, especially because, women-led businesses, most of them have to do with electricity. So, and Vine power is not so cheap. So I had to come up with a system where these women can access power cheaper, in terms of them putting money together and then putting solar in their businesses. I had to come up with that initiative. So my question is now, how do we get support in terms of partnerships
so that more women can benefit with things from things like this.
Thank you so much. Our final question, final one. He came to the front. The gentleman in the red t-shirt came all the way to the front to ask his question. Okay, Okay.
Yeah, my question is, sorry, my name is Omar Yakubu. My question is, I've heard a lot about financialization, macroeconomics, micro. I've not heard anything about industrialization because those things are supposed to lead to industrialization. Sorry, to any of the panel members, thank you.
My name is Samuel Akpan and I write for Paseco News. My question is very simple. Price control. If you go to Pape markets, if you go to Karo markets, if you go to Nyanya markets, the price of Ugu is different. If you go to Benue Steaks, my friend brings in yam from Benue Steaks. It passes through over 12 checkpoints.
Sir, Jay, are you saying that we should bring in price controls? Is that your question? Price controls. Government should control prices.
What is the government doing for price control, number one? Okay. Number two, what the organization in charge of price control, we need to know them today, please. Thank you for it.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. That's it. I think we'll never leave. So, okay, final question.
Also have to go.
I know. It's just
Yes, final. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. I think they've done quite a lot in the area of the interrogations. My name is Dr. Asonwa Henry from University of Nigeria, Nsukka, Department of Economics. First, I want to ask this question. The last administration did quite a lot in the area of looking at the laws that can, unbundling the laws that has to do with energy, making sure that the state can also be part of the concurrent list when it comes to energy. My question is, since you all speak to the government, is there a way you can put more pressure on the federal government to interrogate the state government at different levels more to see how they can be part of the energy problem in solving that issue? That could also reduce unemployment and create more opportunities for the young people in the rural communities and at the state level. And two, like someone talked about price control, what is the role of the government in also putting pressure on different regulatory agencies that can monitor a lot of things going on in Nigeria? Because until we address those areas, then we can actually regain confidence from the people. So the government needs to interrogate a lot in the area of regulatory agencies controlling prices across different boards so that this can also have effect on the things we aim.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much. So, weren't fuel subsidies price controls? Wasn't that what that was? And who wants to go first on the price controls and electricity, please?
Thank you very much. I think just on the frustrations with the price gouging for different suppliers, I think the agency that you are asking for is the Consumer Protection Council, which has that responsibility to ensure that prices are not overly exorbitant. And it's not about price control, it's just about how do you stop price gouging. So you might want to write to that agency, and I've seen them taking action, including in Abuja last year, they took some action. So Federal Consumer Protection Council is the one with that responsibility. In terms of states and power, that reform was done. And I believe that in the last, I was in some meeting where they were talking about 2 states that have made significant progress. They've set up the regulatory agency in the state and they're doing things. I think Abia was one. That's right. And I think 1 or 2 others are doing Lagos. And I think there's another one as well. So there's some movement there, but I'm sure if you put together the right stakeholders, you'll be able to get, I don't want to mislead you into thinking that. But I think what is also emerging, maybe for Waz, if he's here, Agora Policy is really the importance of a conversation also with the subnationals, right? To state governments, because a lot of these reforms as well translate to, especially when you come to the social protection side, really what the states are doing. I think it's very important to do that. The federal can set the framework, can give some incentives, can put in some money, but I think a lot of the work needs to be at that state level. I think those are the questions what I can ask.
So we might not have used the word industrialization, but if you listen to a lot of what we said, we're talking about creating jobs. That really comes from industrialization. We're talking about investment. We're talking about the need to put in place the necessary infrastructure. So I say all that to say, without a doubt, industrialization has got to be a key part of what we're trying to do. And they launched something, I think, last month. Yes, exactly, the National Industrial Policy. So I'm pushing forward with that. But I think the only thing I will add is, doctors said that sometimes we are all guilty of speaking from two sides of our mouths. Whereas on one side, we're saying that we should respect federalism. And then on the other side, we say, no, federal government should be more dominant. Another example is, just earlier this week, somebody said to me as, PMS prices were going up and the whole crisis, is like government should not do price control. And then you come here and it's like, you must do price control. With some of these things, we have to step back and say overall, not just in the short term, but in the mid to long term, what is best. And my own general philosophy is less government interventions per se, no meddling as much as possible. You want the markets to work. Sometimes it needs some curbing. But then, if we're speaking honestly with ourselves, when we talk about price gouging, we have to ask ourselves, why do we do that to each other? That's not government. Why do we as individual Nigerian citizens, just are opportunistic and sometimes, cause pain to our other brothers and sisters?